Good afternoon, Audi S3 fanatics. It's Peter, your Audi S3 fanatic. I also welcome specifically MQB chassis owners, as today's project also applies to you guys. Now, something that I wanted to go ahead and discuss and work on today is going to be the install of a front-mounted intercooler for your MQB chassis. This project is going to be a little complicated as there are several things that you have to remove. The first big caveat that I did want to go ahead and share with you guys, in my research of removing the front mount intercooler, there are several ways to do it, and some of the researches that I found is that you do not have to disconnect or remove your AC condenser. Now, I have installed about 5 front mount intercoolers on the MQB chassis, and each time for myself I have actually disconnected the AC condenser, and what that does is it allows all of the refrigerant to be removed, and then you just have to end up refilling it. But trust me on this here, guys, and you'll see later on when I try to show you what I'm talking about. But if you leave your AC condenser on, you're gonna have to tilt it around. You're gonna do all kinds of stuff to it that could deform some of the hosing and the piping and eventually damage it. Now, if you remove it, it gives you a tremendous amount of space to work with. So we'll go ahead and do that. Now, I did preface that this is really for the MQB chassis. During my research, I found a lot of videos on the Golf R, and while the S3 is essentially the same chassis, there are going to be some nuances of the S3 that's a little different, and I didn't see a whole lot of videos that specifically talked about a front mount intercooler on the S3. So what better way to do this video to dedicate it to the S3 owners so that you can install your front mount intercooler. So the details about this is you have to remove the front bumper to obviously have access to the front mount intercooler. And I have a video for that you guys can go ahead and watch. Once that's done, you have to remove the support beam, you have to remove the undercarriage belly pan, you have to remove the headlights. So it is a very involved process. But with the right tools, I do believe you guys can do it. It will take you between 4 and 6 hours. I suggest that you have a friend help you in removal of the bumper because it is big, it's a little cumbersome, and again, having an extra hands always helps out. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the front mount intercooler removal and install. Now that we have the bumper off the vehicle, let's go specifically to some of the items you're going to have to remove to access the front mount intercooler. Obviously, you have to remove the headlight. There's going to be a few top screws that you have to remove. There's going to be an inner screw here, as well as actually that's the only inner screw underneath, and again the top screw. So go ahead and remove both of the headlights. You are going to have to remove this assembly here, and it looks like there's really no screws here, but you can pull it off. Once you have that there's going to be some wiring that you have to disconnect that attaches to the sensors. Once you're able to remove that, you will finally be exposed to the bolts that removes the crash bar. So it looks as though there are 4 bolts that hold the crash bar on both sides. Go ahead and remove that. That will allow you to pull the crash bar off. So we'll go ahead and remove the outer portion to get the crash bar off, and then I'll show you the inner portion that has to be removed. For the next part of the front mount intercooler removal, I wanted to discuss something that might be a little more controversial. And again, this is the disconnection of the AC lines. So you've got one here that actually attaches to your condenser. Now, as I had indicated to you guys earlier, some DIYs that I have seen on paper say that you leave this attached, this whole cradle here will actually pivot around, and as you can tell, there's not a whole lot of space for it to pivot, and you've got your AC condenser lines right here into the hose. So you can do it that way, but again, it is very limited. You're not able to fully remove this to pull out the front mount intercooler. For myself, I will actually disconnect these lines here, and there are two star bits that you want to remove. When you do remove these AC lines here, all of the freon is going to essentially be released. So it's going to sound like a very large popping sound, and you're going to see a lot of the gases come out. It is safe per se. You're not going to inhale anything that's going to kill you, but it's just going to sound like a large explosion because it is under pressure. Just make sure that you kind of cover it when it releases. But what that essentially does is it allows you to safely pull these two condenser lines to the side so that you can remove this whole assembly. Again, my way is going to be a little more tedious because you remove this, but overall it's going to be easier for you to remove this whole supporting bracket, and I'll show you guys once we're able to remove it. I wanted to add something else that you do have to remove. As you guys can see, I removed the intake runner. What that does is it allows you access to the hood releases, and you do have to remove both sides so that you can swing the complete front end assembly out. Now, very important, if you look down here, this little yellow clip here, that is actually your crash sensor. You do have to remove that. So again, this whole piece swings out. Do not forget that, as that can easily break off. Alright guys, so the very next step in this process is the removal of the supporting bracket here. I have already removed the shroud that was to the side, as well as the crash bar cover that's in black. So I went ahead and removed the majority of the bolts that hold the supporting bracket onto the vehicle. You do not want to remove all of them because this whole assembly will essentially drop. So you want to leave one on both sides so that this is still up. What I will later on I will do is I'm going to put a support piece down here so that when I pull this whole assembly out, I can essentially put the whole intercooler and the assembly on it without too much stress on the other components. So what I will first do is I'm going to disconnect the AC condenser lines here so that I can pivot this whole unit out, and we'll go ahead and do that real quick. Okay guys, so this is the next part that is going to be the most difficult part, trying to position everything to get the intercooler out. As you guys can tell, what I did was I went ahead and disconnected my condenser lines, and what that does is it allows me to take this whole assembly out and pivot it. So let's go ahead and kind of show you a couple things. Also, it disconnected the AC condenser so that I can pull it out. Now we'll go ahead and get this going here. All right, so as you guys can tell, this is the entire condenser, intercooler, radiator support bracket. And by removing it, it gives you a lot of room to work to actually pull this out. I told you the controversial thing is trying to pivot the whole thing out. I know a couple of big name companies tell you to pivot it out, but the last thing you want to do is damage these here and bend them and break them. If you do, you're in a world of hurt. So just spend the extra time. It's not even expensive to replace the AC Freon, but disconnect it. Now we have this entire assembly out. I could go ahead and remove my front mount intercooler that was installed on it before. So to remove the intercooler from the assembly, there is a notch right here that goes to the stock one that you actually want to push down, pull out the intercooler, and then from here you're going to push down because there's another tab that it sits on. So I went ahead and did that on both sides. And the intercooler is out. So we'll go ahead and put the stock one back on in reverse order. I wanted to show you guys a quick tab on the intercooler that has a separate piece that helps it stay in place. Now here's the tab on the intercooler, and I will do an insert of what it looks like, but there's a big unit that goes right in here. It has a couple of attachments that come out that locks it into place on the assembly that holds everything here. During my install process of the front mount intercooler, I actually broke it, as it's a very common piece that breaks. What I will end up doing is I will zip tie it back to the bracket. I did that before and it held perfectly fine. When you are mounting your new intercooler on, the very bottom of the intercooler, it has these tabs that protrude out, and it actually goes into this hole. So what you want to do is you want to angle the intercooler somewhat like this here into that hole, and also on the other side, and then swing the intercooler forward, or this bracket here backwards. But you do need to get those tabs in there. When you are putting back the entire front intercooler, radiator and such assembly, what I'd recommend you guys do is go ahead and position it. You're going to go ahead and bolt the very top one in, as well as the other side, to help keep the bracket in place in the vehicle. And then from there, you're going to go ahead and take the crash bar. You're going to angle it. You see how I somewhat angled it? And then from there, it goes right in like this here. Just like that. And you'll bolt your bolts in. So we'll go ahead and do that real quick. Okay guys, so what we have done at this point is we mounted loosely the complete assembly on the very top. I went ahead and put the supporting bracket or crash bar back in, and now what we'll go ahead and do is kind of button up everything else with all the sensors, all the wiring. I did go ahead and connect the AC condenser lines in. We'll go ahead and do that. We'll do the headlights, and from there we'll put the bumper back on. So all the sensors are wired back in, and what we're going to go ahead and do is put the bumper back on, and we are done with it.